Thanks so much for joining me on the podcast here today. How are you?
Hey, good, Jared. How are you?
I'm doing well. I'm excited to chat.
Yeah,
We
likewise.
tend to keep these short and sweet, so let's dig in. First, I'm going to have you, if you don't mind. Let's hope we're reaching someone that also hasn't heard of Public, although I doubt it. Uh, what would you tell someone new about the company?
Public is an investing app, and we really what we're focused on is having people invest for the long term, which typically means building a multi-asset diversified portfolio across obviously stocks, but even things like bonds. We have treasury bonds, corporate bonds, crypto, obviously, which has found its third or fourth kind of awakening right now, depending on how you count. And so really we're just focused on being the absolutely best investing app out there. A little bit more focused on people who kind of more serious about it. I think a lot of folks in our generation sort of have grown up on some of that meme stock stuff and like playing around, which is totally fine. But I think when people are ready to really take it a little bit more seriously and build their lifetime kind of longer term portfolio, they tend to come onto Public, and we tend to over index on having a lot of capabilities to do that. Like I said, everything from the broad range of asset classes that we offer, the research capability that our platforms offers, and so forth.
And talk me through, obviously, there's how do you decide like what the most important features are? Because you do always seem to add some new cool features, especially kind of like research driven, right? So how do you decide like what gets added and what maybe gets shelved?
Yeah, so that's obviously always the trickiest kind of part of my job. Specifically, I think I'm blessed with having one of the teams that have the highest shipping velocity in the entire space. To be honest with you, and so that makes my job a little bit easier because I can pick more stuff than what I otherwise would. But I think we're very guided on this North Star of like, what do you need to build really a portfolio for the long haul? And how might we help people do that? And when you look at the journey that people tend to go through is there's a couple of different ways people get started investing. Some people sit down and be like, I want to get going right now. I've saved up money. I'm ready to go. I've done my education, done my research. We kind of all remember those types from school. Then there's the other types, more like the rest of us, which is a little bit more learning by doing, a little bit more like stumbling into it, building your portfolio literally brick by brick, trade by trade. And I think as those people evolve, we keep a very close connection. We have a saying internally that we want to be the company that's the closest to their customers. And I think we're able to, obviously, being a smaller, kind of more nimble, higher product velocity firm, able to turn things around really quickly, which I think a lot of our customers and our members really appreciate, because you can highlight a problem that you're having to our customer service team or suggest a feature, and sometimes find that in the product in the next 30 days or 2 weeks even sometimes, which is, I think, pretty... in the world of financial technology, where things tend to take a little bit longer, because actually developing features here that touch money and regulation and everything else, a lot of people seem to just be generally accepting of the fact that like, oh, that means you can't kind of move fast. I was like, no, you can't. And so, we call it move fast and don't break things. So yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about first your thoughts on where AI is at today, and then how Public has implemented AI into your product.
Yep, absolutely. I think generally, if we take a step back, we often say that the first era of consumer finance, consumer fintech, call it what you want, it's like 1.0 was very much about finance going mobile. Therefore, it became very gamified. And that lend itself well to certain types of kind of business models. Your $100 payday loans. You see a bunch of those apps in the App Store. Gamified trading, etc. And I think that was sort of the first era. I think the next era, the next 10 years, are going to be much more about the $100 trillion of assets being passed down in what's called the Great Wealth Transfer, mainly from boomers to millennials. And that's actually what we've been focused on since the beginning. It's funny. I used to tell people in our Series A, I was telling investors about at the time, what was a $40 trillion wealth transfer. I was just 6 years early, and 6 years later, the number is now 100 trillion, obviously due to market appreciation in those last 6 years. And it's such a big opportunity. But I think the business models and the kind of products that will succeed with that are gonna not be the most gamified ones, because I think the gamification of finance lends itself well to get a lot of people into, finance in a way that they haven't done it before. It also lends itself a little bit better to people that had never really done finance before, a lot of unbanked customers, etc. But I think when it comes to investing, that's not necessarily the best recipe for how your portfolio is going to do going forward. And so it's a little bit of a different product for a different opportunity, I think. And a huge part of that, to your question, is research. And so we've really done a lot over the years with research. I think where we started, interestingly, was we had some community aspects of our platform where people could kind of collaborate on research, and it was easier to find out certain things about companies by going to a community and asking them questions. Then we did a lot of work through our public premium features to get financials in the product. We at one point said, hey, let's just hands down have the easiest, best, most sort of slick way of analyzing the financials of a company on the phone. And we built that. And then I guess now 18 months ago, when ChatGPT 3.5 came out, we kind of started playing with that. And we saw how this could really be the next kind of leapfrog for research. And I think 18 months later, where we are today, that's exactly what we found. The vast majority of our users and our members use Alpha, which is our embedded research agent, to research kind of their portfolios or prospective investments in some way or the other. One way is just they swipe down on every stock. It pops up like Alpha, and you can ask any questions about the stock. So rather than digging through the filings, you literally just swipe down, ask any question, right? Oh, I'm about to invest in this company. Is it profitable? If not, how much runway does it have? What's the cash up? People ask all kinds of things, right? What was said on the last earnings calls, this, that, and the other. So it's just a very quick way to get a little bit of the top 5-10 questions you might have around the company before you invest. What we've started doing the last 6 months have made Alpha more proactive. So we have the saying internally that the best assistants in the world are proactive, not reactive. Go back and watch The Devil Wears Prada or whatever the movie is with Anne Hathaway. You'll see that was also the case, right? It's that's always what you want, a proactive assistant that kind of reads your mind and, does something before you even ask for it. And that's what Alpha is turning into as well inside public now. So, if I hold whatever Tesla stock, not financial advice, but just as an example, and they have an earnings call, then Alpha will come and give me a summary of that earnings call the minute that it wraps up without me having to ask for it. And so I think, it's starting to be, because it knows what you own and therefore what you care about, it's starting to be a lot more proactive, which is interesting because it becomes a way where it's much more embedded. It becomes much more habitual in people's kind of investing journeys and investing lives. And I think that's kind of really where it's going. And that's the role that AI can play. And so I think in summary, there's been a lot of work done by us and some others in opening up access for individual investors to invest in the markets. But just having access without having many great tools available to knowing actually what to buy. Now you can buy all the stuff. How do you then put your portfolio together? What do you want to buy and why? That's a little bit what I think this next phase is going to be about. And I think AI, just the inflection point, is just, I think we'll see in hindsight ends up being very important because, that's a way that people can really 10 or 100x their research capabilities, which will end up creating, I think, many more informed investors, which I think it's a huge net positive because, if you go back a couple of years, with great access, everybody's excited about people having more access to the markets, but there are also those on the Hill and other places who were, let's just say, concerned that it might create a bunch of uninformed investors that, was just plowing money into things they didn't know, much about. And I think AI is going to be the single best way, AI research, the single best way that we can make sure that that does not happen.
Now, when you talk about the research on all these companies, like what's the limit in terms of is it only particular, like is it every stock right now is what you're looking at? And I think the coolest part about what you're building is so much of that other information, right? Like there's so many companies that don't get much coverage overall, right? And being able to have that easy swipe down information, and then like you said, be proactive if I'm like watching them, and that's something that like even at a basic level, right? Like the Apple like stock watch list does not do, right? And I feel like a lot of people use that.
It's interesting because on that note, we just launched Alpha actually as a separate app literally last week. Just because you mentioned Apple stocks, so obviously initially Alpha sort of was working inside Public for a portfolio. We now launched Alpha as a separate app, which is not a trading app. It's just a watch list app similar to Apple stocks, but it has those AI superpowers, if you will. So it's a watch list app where instead of just seeing whether a stock is up or down and maybe reading the occasional news article, you just have this AI always scanning your entire portfolio and you know why things are moving immediately. And it's quite awesome because I see often all the publications I have on my phone, Bloomberg, Wall Street Journal, etc. Alpha is typically 10, 15 minutes faster in reporting because it's literally immediate, right? That it tells you like XYZ stock is up or down 5%. This is why, and so we rolled that out last week and we're very excited about that. But I think if you look at the flow of information, generally all public companies are public, which means all the data tends to be there. The way we've consumed it in the past is it tends to go through a filter of essentially media that writes up articles about whether it's an earnings call, a company performance, or new product launches, whatever the case may be. And then it gets interpreted by the individual investing community. And I think with AI, you can kind of skip that whole middle layer a little bit and you go straight. And then obviously media has had its fair share of issues over the years. I think that became even more, I think now probably more topical than ever, I would argue. But now you have this product where Alpha can just go directly and look at all the filings, unbiased. It doesn't own one stock or another stock, similar to the way sometimes people on CNBC might, etc., or somebody in a social forum that you're like, it doesn't own anything. It's just unbiased, factual. This is what's happening. And so I think it's much better for the big stocks to just get it directly from the source. But to your point, arguably maybe it's even better for some of the smaller cap companies where there isn't much media coverage in the first place. And by the way, it's also even analyst coverage, right? It's not, the Magnificent Seven might have like dozens of analysts covering them, if not hundreds, but some of the smaller companies have like 0 or 1.
I've seen a major shift over the last few years of like, there's just not much coverage on any of that stuff. Like we're covering the same companies over and over again. So I think this is even more important now than ever before. It's funny. I'm sure no one on CNBC pumps their own stock up that they own when they're talking about companies. They wouldn't do that, right?
Well, they tend to be pretty good with disclosures on CNBC specifically. Nevertheless, though, you always have this thing of like, okay, now you're saying something, you're disclosing your position. That's cool. You should do that. But I still have to like figure out with what grain of salt do I take your comments right now, right? Given your position.
Like I own this stock. Here, let me tell you why it's so great. And it's
exactly.
Which
exactly.
They are following proper disclosures, right? So that's fine. But it's always like, what do they always say lately about, oh man, the Reddit boards and stuff are brutal with Jim Cramer.
Oh, inverse like Cramer.
Yeah, and it's I don't know, it's funny sometimes. I don't think it used to be that way. I feel like people purposely are looking out for that and kind of doing like
100% there.
Purposely the reverse, right? Yeah.
Of course.
When you think about like even just outside of the company, right? what's your level of excitement around AI? Are there particular tools like that you want to shout out here that you're also a fan of, outside of what you're doing?
Outside of investing or just outside public's efforts?
Um, Either or. Like, if you don't,
Yeah.
I'm not saying for you
Okay.
to call out a
Yeah.
particular.
I mean, look, I think in our space, honestly, I've been a little surprised that I think we're the only brokerage, certainly in America, but maybe in the world, that have launched like a really actually like an AI assistant of any form. Um, but I don't suspect will be the last. I think there'll be a lot more coming in 2025 and 26. I think outside our space, there's a bunch of cool stuff. Victor comes to mind, who you had on the show a few episodes ago with Synthesia. Again, those guys are not like a new AI company. They started like 8 years ago, and now they finally obviously have captured lightning in a bottle with their products, and the rate of progression in their product is just awesome. And I was even talking to somebody today of like, yeah, like earnings calls. I mean, really the first half of earnings calls is just a person sitting there reading from a script, right? And so now you could literally just feed that to your own version of an avatar and they can do the first half. And then there's still the Q&A. You'll probably still have to do that. But like you could actually do that today. And people could, and you wouldn't even notice, right? So I think there's a lot of stuff kind of happening there. And I think the way that they're thinking about how their business is can open up so many new pathways. Everything from the HR onboarding emails that they also mentioned, but then you start to ideate and you see the role that video is playing in today's society. And there's a lot of things there. And then I think that there are other verticals where it also just, in the healthcare sector, for instance, there's another Danish company called Corti that another friend of mine is running that I think is very exciting to follow, because I think generally when I think about, healthcare, finance, legal, like there's so much room for improvement. And I think it ends up being pretty interesting because some of those companies or some of those industries that have had a really hard time even adapting to like, call it Web 2.0 and tech in general, suddenly you introduce AI into those industries and it's almost like a double leapfrog, right? Where you go from like a lot of email, a lot of old school stuff straight to like, AI platforms. And I'm just really excited about what that can do, at large, because I think there's, like I said, a ton of room for improvement in some of those big old industries.
When you look towards, we're obviously heading into 2025 now. What excites you most about what's next?
I think I would say moving from, if you look through the lens of the consumer, just like the average consumer, not all the power users, but just like the average consumer, I think AI has basically been equal to ChatGPT. That was like the first big product there, etc. And while ChatGPT, I think, still has a bright future ahead of them, I don't think that we'll sit here 2 or 3 years from now and have that still be the case. I think AI will make its way into many more products, being sort of more weaved into product experiences. And I think the way that you get the usage rate from, whatever it is today to near 100% is actually just to bake it in to these products. Said it another way, like I don't think that you are going to be talking about many of these products in a couple of years as like an AI product. It is just AI weaved into the product experience, right? And it's a little bit the same thing you saw with cloud and with mobile, right? Everyone was like a mobile first company and everyone's a cloud company. And now, everyone just has a mobile app and are hosting stuff in the cloud. And so I think that transition will be exciting because it's obviously correlated to just AI having a larger impact, reaching many more people. Frankly, I think Public is a pretty good example of that. We don't necessarily see ourselves as like an AI first company, but we do have a little bit of a arguably first mover advantage in the world of investing on AI, and we do have a product that is used by an AI product that's used by 90+% of our customers. And I think that's a little bit more where I think but it's typical that a space goes through that initial hype where everybody wants to put labels on things, but really where the impact and the broad reaching, the broad reaching impact comes is at the later stage where it just starts to get dispersed into all these industries, and the consumer doesn't necessarily have to know whether it's AI or not. It just means that something is an order of magnitude better experience.
Well, I mean, what you're building though, it'll stand the test of time. A lot of these just products that are just they have to tell you that they're AI over and over and over again, right? Those ones I worry a little bit about because they're just kind of on the hype cycle. And, like you were saying, we also had on the CEO of Grammarly, and he was talking about just like, hey, whatever we're doing, we need to augment how humans are doing the work, how they're doing the research. And that's really, like you were saying, AI to enhance the current product that we have, not going here and, screaming from the rooftops that, we're an AI first company or something like that. You shouldn't have, like you said, everyone is, if you're not doing that, you're going to be in trouble.
Yeah.
You make a really good point.
No, totally. And I also think classically just, very few customers want an AI powered X product, whatever X might be. People want solutions to problems that they're having. And so really it's about figuring out what role might AI play in that. And by the way, there's going to be some industries where that answer is none at all, probably. And then it's best for those companies just to keep doing what they're doing and not try to sort of force AI down the throat of their own company. But it's not like if you ask a consumer, like, given the choice between product A, product B, one is AI powered, what isn't? Which one do you pick? It's not like they'll be, I'll pick the AI powered one. It's like, no. Like, tell me about the problems that you're using AI to solve here. And then you've got a real value proposition. So I think just putting AI in front of everything, I obviously realize it's been happening a lot in the last year or two, but I don't necessarily think that it's something that consumers are resonating with, actually.
Agreed. Well, I want to thank you so much for joining me here today. I really appreciate this conversation. It was awesome having you here and look forward to future conversations.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me, Jared.